Lebanon, Egypt, Israel. You're playing NEA, as I like to say. I'm looking at my NEA friends here. You're playing in the American League East. I mean, this is a tough league to get assets in. And so Yemen just wasn't a priority. It's a little more of a priority now. Let's see what happens.
Any press members here? Questions from the press? No? Questions? There's a right here.
I'm not the press.
No, that's okay. There are no other questions.
I can't talk to you. If
Steve Buck, MEI Life member. I think I've already got the answer from your comments, but I'd be interested in your comments on Salas talking to Al-Qaeda. And secondly, the Yemenis and the Saudis are very together right now, but is the Saudi campaign, the military campaign, really such a great idea? And finally, it seems to be the implication from what you're saying, wouldn't a very simple thing for us to do is to really demarche the GCC countries and have a conversation with them, particularly the Saudis, about letting many more Yemenis back in, because that's the simplest thing to help the economy.
Okay, the gentleman right next to Mr. Hunt.
I'm Dale Dean. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer. I was wondering if you could talk a little about the relationship Al-Qaeda has with Yemeni tribes, and to the extent that it's supportive, whether there's anything we can do to break that.
Maybe we could divide these two questions up, but whoever would like to take.
Well, let me kind of take the Al-Qaeda ones, and you want to take the Saudi and military and the demarche to GCC? Or something?
Okay.
Does that sound all right?
Sure.
I'll focus on the Al-Qaeda first. Al-Qaeda links with the tribes. And this is a complex issue. Yemen, in my opinion, disagree if you will, is one of the least ideological places I've ever been. There is no real support for an Al-Qaeda ideology, a return to the caliphate, whatever the hell their ideology is, and I can't figure it out sometime. But there's almost zero support, especially in my view. And I do not pretend to know the tribes, and anyone who does, you're wrong. But I do not think that there is a great deal of support for a philosophy and ideology that Al-Qaeda might represent. What tribal leaders see these guys as are levers that they can use to put pressure on the central government to get more. The kidnappings of foreigners back in the 90s were a great example of this as well. This is a much tougher game, but it was, they protect these guys not because they have to. It's not like in Iraq where the Al-Qaeda really started taking over towns. They protect them because it's a bargaining chip with Ali Abdullah Saleh. And that's what he sees it as. Now, there are a few outliers who aren't associated with the tribes, who are under to operate in Ma'rib, you've got to have some degree of tribal support. You're not going to move around Ma'rib or Shabwa or Jauf without somebody knowing about it, and somebody who could stop you as well. So it's that when he says he's going to negotiate with Al-Qaeda, a lot of that is just PR. But most of it is he is negotiating with Al-Qaeda. He's always negotiated with Al-Qaeda, and he does it through the tribes. When he was releasing these guys, when we were talking about the release of the Guantanamo prisoners, for example, this release program, which he saw as kind of a parole program, they release them to the custody of tribal leaders. And they make a deal with those tribal leaders, related or not, family relations or not, make a deal with the tribal leaders. You keep, Muhammad under control, and you'll get, sometimes it's basic stuff. You'll get money, you'll get guns. Oftentimes it's you'll have that school built, and we'll make sure the road is built up to your village, or the well is dug, or the pipe is put in as well. It's that simple. And I think on the Saudis in particular, maybe David wants to add, the Saudi relationship is complex. David?
I spent 5 years in Saudi Arabia, almost as long, and these are two people who do not particularly like each other historically or understand each other pretty well. I think with regard to the Saudi fighting in the north, they want to be very careful. Yemenis are tough fighters, and the Saudis may be better equipped as an army than the Yemeni army, but they do not really have any military experience or any strong motivation, I think, to fight, and they want to be very careful. One of the problems, of course, is it seems the Saudis, the complaint of the Houthis with the Saudis were allowing the Yemeni army to come around behind them using Saudi territory. And the Saudi effort seems to be to turn a couple of kilometers or more into move all the people out and turn it into a free fire zone. Well, you've got a border that's going through a number of tribal areas, and there are tribesmen on both sides of the border. That is going to, and there were already serious complaints on the Yemeni side when the Saudis began to militarize the border and not just have posts there, but actually put up a wall there. So I think I understand why the Saudis feel they have to protect their people, but I think they want to be awfully careful not to get in over their heads. If you forgive, because I majored in history, a historical comment. In 1904, when this famous Ottoman commander fought his way up, Sana'a was besieged by the Yemeni tribesmen under the name of the Imam, and he commented famously, "If I had soldiers like this, I could conquer half of Europe." Well, tribesmen don't travel well, but when they're fighting on their own turf, I think you want to be very careful. Démarche to the GCC, I think we are talking to them, but I think we have to continue to let them know that this financially is really beyond us to take on all of these problems. We need to play a significant role, and I think we will. But it's in the GCC interests. Yemen historically has been a population reservoir for going back to the Arab conquest. I mean, there are a lot of Yemenis, and they're pretty energetic, and I wouldn't want to have them particularly as enemies when you have these very lightly populated GCC states. So it's very much in the interest of the GCC with their revenues to try to deal with some of these problems and help the Yemenis. Now, maybe I'm not objective, I'm sympathetic to the Yemenis, but I think it is in their interest.
No, I think so too. And then regarding Yemeni labor, it's a hard go. I mean, there were many, again, hundreds of thousands of Yemenis working throughout the Gulf before 1990. Many of them were sent home after the invasion of Kuwait. Anyone in Kuwait, any of the Saudis were sent home. And there is a suspicion of Yemenis bringing in radical Islam, bringing in violent al-Qaeda, violent tendencies to these countries as well. But I think in principle, employing Yemenis throughout the Gulf is a good policy. It's something they should pursue. I understand how difficult it will be to re-employ however many hundreds of thousands again. And the security issue is also real.
Great. Well, I think we've got time for two more questions. Here's a question from Christy Delafield, National Conference of State Legislators. What is or could be the role of Shura or other forms of representation in governance in Yemen going forward? Do we have any questions about the political system to follow up on this? If not, I might note that, there's a lot of fear that the millions we're going to invest in Yemen, of course, will be used by the Saleh government, not necessarily to fight al-Qaeda, but to entrench power and to continue his battles against the Houthi rebels in the north and the repression of the secessionist movement in the south. Is there anything that we can do to incentivize political reform and the bringing in of the other tribal leaders and political groups?
If we all agree and we get the money, the funds, the programs put together to go beyond defeating al-Qaeda and to address some of these other issues, the major barrier to that will be